introduction, I'll tell you that I'm a little my firm calls me Triple Trouble. That's like my nickname because I really work kind of doing three things. So I do a ton of like startup work. So that would be that you're just starting your company, you have created something incredible at the university that you were working with, and you're spinning it out for the first time. You're brand new CEO. I work a lot with companies that kind of started off, maybe didn't get off on the best foot because they didn't have money to hire legal counsel. So I'll bring them in, clean them up, get them ready for their first financing. So that's a lot of kind of the startup work that I do. I then, at the other end of the story, do mergers and acquisitions, which basically means that once you have created this incredible life-changing product that is saving people's lives, then hopefully we sell you for a lot of money so that you can go off and buy a moderately sized tropical island. That is always the goal, okay? It's a tropical island of some size, you know, like sometimes it's like Micronesia and sometimes it's Hawaii, but it's tropical nonetheless. And right in the sandwich in the middle is where we're going to focus today. That is what they call tech transactions. That is really like your day-to-day business, And specifically today, we're going to focus in on licensing, how that works, how that runs. I titled this Licensing 101, but it's kind of difficult for me to tell like how much experience you might have. So hopefully I'm pitching this with the concept that most people know something. Some people have a deep dive in a particular area. And my goal is that hopefully something that even if you do know a lot in a particular area, maybe I can just give you a different perspective and there'll be some kind of pearls of wisdom, you never know, that at least it'll sound like pearls of wisdom with this accent. So, you know, there'll be some pearls of wisdom that you can take away with you. So that's the goal of today. As we said, feel free to drop comments into the chat box. And if I see something that I think I can answer kind of on the fly, I absolutely will. Otherwise, I'm going to kind of power through and try to hit the questions at the end. But drop them in the chat box as you go. And if I can pick them up at the time, I absolutely will. We don't have like a massive group today. So hopefully that might mean that we get to interact, which I know is scary when you thought that you were the other side of the screen and you didn't have to talk to anyone, but you never know. Just be careful. I could call on you, like law school, cold calling. That would be terrible. No, I promise I won't do that. It's 9 a.m. on a Thursday morning. Like, that would just be cruel. Okay, so let's see. Okay, so the first thing, I want to be clear. I deal almost exclusively with things that I call beyond the widget. I very rarely deal with companies that are making and selling widgets that have been made and sold for hundreds of years and are generally like state of the art. I don't deal with like furniture companies or companies that make screws and nails. Like in general, the kind of companies that I deal with are largely life sciences, and for some reason any other intellectual property that no one else in the firm understands. I'm not sure why they think that I do. Again, I think it's the English accent, but I have a lot of fun, you know. So I was kind of first to get on the ground with AI, which was fascinating. I do a lot of kind of integrated firmware and tech where you've got like kind of where you've got computer software, but you've got computer firmware, so it's actually kind of embedded into something. That means that I get to work with a lot of really cool military equipment. But as I said, my largest scope is going to be in life sciences. So that's really where I want to focus today. So let's start with the concept of an asset. Okay, what is an asset? An asset is a lawyer's fancy word for a thing. That thing can be tangible. I can like pick it up. Here is my asset. I can pick it up. I can do things with it, right? Or it can be intangible. Like, for example, the words that I'm saying and that are coming out right now, intangible concepts. So your assets can be tangible or intangible. IP is an intangible asset, and that's kind of our focus. What can you do with assets? Well, you can develop them, you can manufacture them, create them, change them. You can also transfer your assets. And just like you can transfer a physical asset, you can transfer an intangible asset. What we want to talk about though today is a license. A license legally is literally the right to use. It's not a transfer of ownership. It is a transfer of a right to use a particular asset. And the nice thing about licenses is they are phenomenally flexible, because what you can do is you can absolutely customize what rights someone is getting to the use of an asset. And the more sophisticated you get about how you are building that use right, sometimes the more value you can eke out of an asset, right? Because I can sell smaller and smaller pieces of it. Of course, the more complicated you get with kind of describing different ways in which different people can use the same asset, the challenge becomes, what if you don't word it quite right and you give two people the right to do exactly the same thing with your asset? Now, with a tangible asset, people are just going to have an argument over who gets the tangible asset. It's a little bit like, what's the game? Musical chairs, right? I think you call it musical chairs in America, right? Yes? Okay, Teresa's nodding at me. There have been some very terrible moments when I moved to America where I have said something out loud and someone has said, oh, we don't call it that here in America. I won't go into those because this is being recorded, but call me later and I'll regale you with the stories. So with a tangible asset, it's a little bit like this, right? We can all fight over the same physical asset and you can see it and feel it and everyone knows that there's a problem. With an intangible asset, people could go a while not realizing that they are treading on each other's toes. And in fact, sometimes you can get right the way into kind of the M&A process before finally someone is looking at the documents and going, I think there's an issue here, which can tank your valuation. It can tank the amount that someone is willing to pay for your company and therefore the size of your tropical island, right? Because what it will do is it'll create this complication of, okay, if you are the licensor, now you have two licensees, both of whom are very upset with you, and a buyer who's like, I don't want to take on those people, thank you so much. If you are the licensee in that case, then you've got a buyer going, I thought you said you had the rights to this. So anytime you get a little bit more complicated with your scope, you've got to be careful that you are as clear as possible. So in terms of life sciences, I see most often the following two types of licenses. The first is an in-license from a university. In-license, the company is bringing it in. This is one of those times when lawyers decided to call it exactly what it is, okay? It is a license for an asset that you are bringing into your company. So when you are in licensing from a university, oftentimes this is a professor who developed the IP while he was at the university. The university has patented it, and now that entrepreneur is ready to leave. The professor is ready to leave the hallowed, sacred, and protective halls of the university and go out there into the wide world, maybe get themselves some space at university lab partners, and go out there and build a company, right? So that the process of being able to take your IP with you, it's kind of important that you do this. I feel like sometimes professors are very aggrieved by this idea because they created it. It's mine, my idea. It may be your idea, but the university owns it now. In fact, anything that you did at the university will claim. If it has anything remotely to do with what you profess in, the university probably has ownership rights, which is a good argument to say, don't mix. It's very difficult to draw lines with universities when you are a professor at the university and you are also trying to run your own company, because sometimes you accidentally, due to the university's very expansive policies over what they own of you, your brain and your ideas, the answer is everything, right? They will very expansively be able to pull in all of that IP that you thought you were creating for your company, but the university thinks that they own. And you know what they'll want for it because they think they own it? They'll want you to in-license it. And with an in-license comes some dollar amounts, right? Royalties. So don't accidentally create value for the university when you don't need to. So when you are licensing that first piece of IP, the group that you'll usually deal with at the university is the tech transfer office. This is what they do day in, day out. I don't know how they do it. I think it must be a very boring job. I'm very lucky that I do lots of things, but they generally have standard form agreements, and you can find their standard form agreements oftentimes filed online because many companies have a requirement to disclose their agreements, their material agreements, as part of our securities laws. So the SEC website is a fantastic way to do this. So I'm going to put in the chat box. If you want to look at, because we're in California, you want to find a form agreement for one of the UC colleges, this is what I would type. I would do regents and license, and I'm usually going to pick a word that I know pops up in all of their contracts, but not very much else. Indemnification is a fancy legal word, so that's something that I use. And then I'm going to tell it that I want it to search the SEC.gov. So I'm going to stick that in the chat right now. You kind of sometimes have to play around with your terms, but all UCs, their contracting party is usually regents of something, right? So you should be able to find a whole host of examples of their license agreements online. So you can take a look at what you're expecting to get from your tech transfer, from the tech transfer teams. There'll be a lot of discussion about scope. A lot of times universities will have a pattern and they will divide it up between different people in order to do exactly what I was talking about before, maximize the bang for the buck that they get. So it might be that the professor who created the pattern has gone off with a lead candidate. Sometimes the university will say, well, we'll give you a license for your lead candidate, but there's a few other people who have expressed interest in this pattern, and we're going to give them a license for their particular lead candidate. So just be mindful when you are talking to those tech transfer offices about how you are describing yourself. If you are describing yourself as I'm going off to develop this one thing, you are maybe setting yourself up for a very narrow license, right? Even if that is your passion product, your passion field, you sometimes do yourself a lot of favors by kind of being a little bit expansive and optimistic and, forward thinking and, a little bit Silicon Valley, and, telling them that, you're really excited. While you have a lead candidate, you expect to see it in a few different areas. It's a balancing act, because also the bigger scope the university gives you, the more money they are going to want. So bit of a balancing act also. We'll talk about economics in a minute. The other place that I see a lot of contracting is out licensing to clients. This is where you have a life science company or a med tech company, and you are licensing out your IP to clients. So screening services is a great example. Sometimes we will license out results, right? Because we don't want to, we don't actually want to transfer ownership of it. If we have a piece of med tech, we don't want to sell our software to, we always talk about selling software. Microsoft does not sell software. Microsoft licenses software, but it would be really expensive to buy Microsoft Word. Trust me. It's not so expensive, although it is slightly more than you would expect. It is slightly expensive, but not quite that much to license Microsoft Word. The same thing. You are not going to, until you are ready for your tropical island, you are not selling your software to anyone. You will be licensing it out. So if you have some kind of tech platform, there's going to be out licensing. I try and encourage my clients to invest in having standard form agreements, especially in the life science space. When it's just like a widget, like I know it's a very standard, it's a very standard SaaS platform, something like that. It's not very exciting, then oftentimes you can contract using someone else's forms. But with life sciences, I often find that we are a group of people who are developing innovative products that don't quite work as you would expect. And so I really encourage clients to make that investment if you are a service company and create your own standard form agreement. You might still end up stuck dealing with paper, dealing with the standard form contracts of large biotechs who are going to look at your form contract and go, oh, no. You have to take our contract and redline it. Sometimes, depending on how much leverage you have, sometimes you can push back. If you have a very innovative program that they really, really want, I've definitely seen plenty of my clients say, oh, that's really nice, Johnson & Johnson, but you're stuck with us. You want our product? Here's our standard form. And sometimes big biotechs have said yes. But at least if you have a standard form, you know somewhere what you're looking for when you get when you get your potential client's paper in the door. But you're going to end up spending the money anyway, because if you have to review a standard form agreement from, I know, any of these big biotechs, oftentimes you're going to need an attorney to look at that, because they will hide the craziest things in the weirdest places. They are geniuses at doing that. And their contracts are sometimes phenomenally badly written. Scope of license. So I wanted to talk about some of the ways in which you can customize the licenses that you are bringing in or sending out. And these are some of the words that we use in order to discuss that. So exclusivity. Is it exclusive, i.e. you're giving it to someone and only they can use it? Or is it non-exclusive in that, no, I can give it to you and I can give it to you and I can give it to a number of people all at the same time. You cannot give more than one exclusive license to the same IP. It is not possible, right? Either it's exclusive or it's not. It's kind of like a VIP room with only space for one person, okay? If it's exclusive, whatever you are licensing has to be just for that one person. If it's non-exclusive, bring it on. Put as many people in there as you like. So you will want your in licenses from the university to be exclusive. I hear you all called it out. I know you did. You were like right there with me, right? And here, Here's the stumper question. Are you ready for this? Are you ready? You will want your out licenses to your clients and customers to be what? Non-exclusive. Good job. You see, it's a little bit like Blue's Clues, right? Where like you listen to your kids on like the screen and like they're singing along, you know. It's very cute. Okay. We'll talk about price in a minute. Sub-licensable. In general, if you say nothing, it is sub-licensable, which is not great. It's one of those things where it's like, no, if you are out licensing, you want to be really clear. Can they sub-license it or not? Because 1 minute you think you've got what you're working with one person, and then the next minute, no, it's like a completely different person. We're like, what do you mean you sub-license it to someone in the middle of China who's now got all of my IP and you know, what do you mean you've now like sub-licensed it out to like 5 or 6 different people, and now I'm trying to chase 5 or 6 different people because you are just not, you just don't care anymore because you kind of sub-licensed it. So default is that it is sub-licensable. Therefore, if you do not want it to be sub-licensable, you have to say so. Speak up. You can also customize how sub-licensable something is. You can say, you can sub-license it, but only to these people. Oftentimes, I tell people that there has to be some sub-licensing usually, because they need to be able to at least give it to their own service providers, right? So if you sub-license something out, if you license something out, usually they'll need to give a license to their own service providers who are giving it back to them. That's not so much of an issue for you. Those service providers are not going off and making money by themselves, right? They are literally just enhancing what your licensee is doing. So you can customize how sub-licensable it is, but obviously on your in licenses from universities, really try and get sub-licensing and really try and get it as unrestricted as possible, because you never know when you might want to collaborate. And if you collaborate with someone, especially when we're in like a tight capital market right now, and collaboration is the way you're going to move your product forward, because people are just not spending money. We're really like struggling to get kind of VCs to, you know, stump up some cash, and you've got to do something else instead. You will want that flexibility to be able to sub-license. Todd, do you recommend putting something in the terms that the IP is only sub-licensable with written approval of the licensor? You can absolutely put that. You actually don't need to technically, because you could always say it's not sub-licensable, and then when they come to you, you can waive that, right? Just by a letter agreement. But you know, you're right that it's pretty common that people will say you can sub-license it as long as you ask me first. And I like the fact that you put in written. That is super important, right? Approval means that someone calls you up and goes, yo, Dave, can I do this? And your receptionist goes, oh, I don't see why not. And then suddenly, you know, you've got some licensee out there doing crazy things, right? So yes, you definitely want it written down. Scope on the type of activities. There is a lot, generally what you see here is a lot of language which you think all means the same thing. This is an example of lawyers being really anal, but you'll see things like make and have made, import and export, manufacture and have manufactured. And you're just like, oh my gosh, do you guys get paid per word? The answer is no, but when we write longer sentences, it takes us longer and it makes us sound smart. So for some reason, we have decided as lawyers, and it was before my time, so I'm not taking responsibility for this. We have decided that we need to use all of these words. So when you want to do an expansive license, you are going to use all the words. We are going to use all the words that we can. We're going to use it and export it and import it and make it and have it and all of of these words, right? But you can also restrict it. So for example, if you are licensing your IP to a vendor for them to do a particular service for you, then your grant of license should read, I license you this special piece of IP solely for you to perform the services. Don't you dare think about doing anything else. Solely for the purpose of providing me services, right? So it's an example of being able to play with the activities. The next one is the word field. This does not mean green cows field, right? Field is usually, it's certainly in life sciences, is usually used for an indication, a particular area, a particular diagnostic area. It's a substantive subject matter. And then territory is used almost always for geography. I really recommend sticking with these standard words because everyone knows what they mean. I do not recommend trying to say you can use it in the territory. And territory means oncology services in North America. No, oncology is a field. North America is a territory. Let's try and split it up and try and be as normal and standard as possible. I say normal. What I really mean is boring. Be boring. Be boring. Your contracts, when someone looks at your contract, the only thing that they should care about is the appendices where it lists the patents or the services where it lists what you actually do, i.e. the substantive business points of the contract. I never want an investor looking at the body of a contract and going, oh, that's interesting. That is bad news, right? And so especially if you have a contract where you've been a little bit creative with your language, or I hate to say it, use ChatGPT. ChatGPT creates really pretty contracts. They're pretty. ChatGPT will even put your logo on the contract, but ChatGPT is a moron when it comes to contracting. You're just going to have to trust me on that one. I have seen some phenomenally pretty contracts that completely screwed the client. So field, territory, exclusivity, sub-licensing, these are all words that you want to see, understand, and think about. Scope of license. So here I've got some examples here of some contracts that I pulled straight off the internet in exactly the same way that I showed you before, with this idea of searching just on sec.gov. So you can see here, this is a Gilead contract. It is co-exclusive, which means that Gilead can use it and Tibotec and Tibotec's affiliates, but no one else. So we definitely see this also where you can have exclusive even as to licensor. That means the licensor can't use it, only the licensee. Co-exclusive, both the licensor and the licensee can use it. Non-exclusive, licensor can use it, plus anyone else the licensor decides to grant to. Royalty free. I definitely put in my contracts whether or not the license is it fully paid up? Does it have a fee? Is there a royalty? So words like royalty free, fully paid up will be a contract, a license usually that's ancillary to the main contract. You can see right to grant sub-licenses solely to conduct commercialization activities in the field, in the territory, and you see the capital letters, that will mean that it's the field and the territory is defined somewhere else in the agreement and you have to go find it. Other ones do we have here? Oh, here we go. You remember I was talking about that example of lawyers using all the words? We're going to make and have made, import, use, offer for sale, including offers for sale made by licensees, third-party agents, and sell. Basically said the same thing in many different ways. Let's talk about money. So I talked a little bit about getting your tropical island at the end of it. This is, we're kind of more talking about the contracts that make up the sandwich of your agreement. So generally, I know that a lot of times when people come to me and they say to me, okay, what should we be thinking about in terms of royalties? What's everyone else doing? I often encourage my clients to think about it a little differently. I will say, okay, what is the market opportunity here? 10 million, 100 million, a billion? What is your market opportunity? How much do you think that you could make from this profit? Now tell me what percentage of that you are willing to give up to whoever is the licensor here, or if you're the licensor, what percentage you want to get back from whoever you're licensing it to. And now split it between 3 different modalities, 3 different revenue streams. The first is upfront fees. This is a fixed number. It is at the beginning of the contract, you were going to pay me $500,000. Boom, this is an upfront fee. It is fixed. If you charge a lot in upfront fees, these are low risk, and over the life, you will get less. So you've kind of got like your target in the middle of what you're aiming for. So let's say your market opportunity is 100 million. You want to get 10 million of that as the licensor, right? You're licensing it out. You want to get 10 million as the licensor. That's kind of my like target that I'm looking at. If I charge if I try and charge upfront, firstly, your licensee probably won't be able to give you 10 million upfront, but also they won't give you 10 million because that's entirely low risk. They haven't done anything yet. They don't even know that they can do anything yet. They probably don't have approvals yet, right? It's entirely low risk. So they will say, well, you're getting certain money and I'm living in a very uncertain world. So most I'm going to give you is 5 and then I'm done. That's a fully paid up license. So if you're charging upfront fees, just understand that the more upfront fees, the further away negative you are going to get from kind of your like eye on the prize number. Milestones are those kind of events, milestones, right? Again, yet another example of lawyers calling something that you understand. We should be very proud of ourselves as lawyers for doing this. So milestones are going to be you hit a particular target. Once you hit a target, then you pay something. These are usually what people call de-risking. You have de-risked your IP. So it could be good results out of preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, right? So what it does is it kind of pushes the fees into slightly higher risk areas, right? But still not all the way out to commercialization. That's going to kind of get you more to that middle number, right? If all you did were kind of milestones and you spread it fairly evenly over development, you probably like hit your middle number pretty squarely, right? Royalties are, you got to get that product all the way to commercialization and you got to sell it. And then people are going to get back a percentage of whatever they sell. If you have a wildly successful product, you can be wildly on the plus side of your target number. But of course, especially in life sciences, this is a very, very high risk place to put your eggs, right? Right? So what you want to do usually is try and make some smart decisions as a licensor as to where you're going to put those. And as a licensee, could do exactly the same thing. Think about, okay, actually add in as a licensee, when are you going to be able to afford to pay these fees? Because remember, as a life science company, that commercialization is way down the line, and many life science companies do not commercialize until you've already walked away with your client, right? They will get bought by big biotechs when they're like phase 3, when they're sufficiently de-risked. So you can run a company, develop it, and not make a single sale, yet be able to sell your company. Welcome to life sciences. And by the way, the reason why you always want to hire lawyers, accountants, business people who understand life sciences. Don't get a startup attorney who focuses in on the latest dating app or computer game, because they'll be like, what do you mean you don't have any sales? Right? You really want to make sure that you are contracting with people who understand life sciences. So just a different way of kind of thinking about how you can be smart about spreading your costs across kind of a range of time, a range of events that progressively de-risk your asset. I have no idea why we call it this. We call it buckets of IP. Don't ask me why. It just is. I think we should call it test tubes of IP, but we don't. So a lot of times you will hear lawyers talking about what the different buckets of IP are. So in any contract, you will usually have something which is called background IP or pre-existing IP. This is intellectual property which has been developed, created outside of the context of the contract that you are doing if you are, for example, a service provider. Foreground IP, otherwise known as arising IP sometimes, this is going to be IP that you create when you are actually doing, for example, the services. So what you want to always make sure when you are providing a service to clients, is that you need to hold on to your background IP. I cannot tell you the number of times that I've reviewed contracts where service providers have licensed their core IP out to their clients. That is a bad idea, because if you license your background IP to your client, you will have the sum total of how many clients? One. Because you licensed your IP to them, right? You can license background IP sometimes non-exclusively, but just be careful, because you could accidentally end up even transferring ownership to your background IP. Yet another reason why it's always good to have a form contract and a lawyer who's looked at it. Indemnification. This is a big area and a long word that most people don't understand, but the problem is it's one of the highest risk areas in a contract, because claims of infringement in IP are incredibly expensive to litigate and settle. So if you indemnify someone, if you say, I am making sure that if someone sues you, I will cover it, you want to be really careful and think very carefully about what you are willing to indemnify for, right? If, for example, you are screening for someone, I don't think that any screening service wants to indemnify for infringement. If you identify a target, if you identify a hit for a particular target, do you really want to hire a lawyer to go through the wealth of patents that exist out there in the world to work out whether the hit that you are providing to the client is already patented or not. You don't want to do that, right? So standard language, which you'll see oftentimes in a contract for services that you'll get from some of the big biotechs, often will not work because you're like, I'm not a patent attorney. I don't run, well, I'm not a patent attorney, but I am an attorney, but you are not a patent attorney. You don't know how to do freedom to operate. And even if you did know how to do freedom to operate, you still wouldn't give them guarantees. My patent attorneys, when they do freedom to operate studies, they do not indemnify for infringement. They're like, we'll do the service for you, but you know what? This is a risk that you have to take. So indemnification is an area that I would always recommend that you have a lawyer look at and think carefully about what is smart to give from your what is smart to give as protections. For example, I think it's really fair to indemnify someone for infringement, for incorporating into their work, into their deliverable, something that you actually know infringes on a patent. You should do that. You should infringe them for you should protect them for that. Because it is not fair to do that without telling them, right? So there are things that you can indemnify for and you can kind of control for the risk there, but otherwise just be smart about it. I want to finish before I start answering some questions by giving you the stupid stuff, right? This is kind of your stupid stuff. Do not slip up on these things. And this, by the way, applies to any legal agreement, okay? But we're specifically talking about licenses right now. Here's the stupid stuff. Make sure that the names in the contract are the actual names of the entities that you are dealing with, right? If you walk into a party and you walk up to someone and go, Bob, it is so nice to see you, right? There are plenty of people who will be so embarrassed for you that they will just shake your hand and go, yes, yes, and they won't tell you that that's actually their name is actually James, right? But the number of times I see us do this in contracts, right? We're like, well, your name is you look like you're like Biotech 7, right? You are Biotech 7 LLC. You're actually Biotech 7 Incorporated, right? Or you're not even Biotech 7. That's a trade name that you have. So it's always worth checking that the legal names are correct, because there are definitely people who have escaped contracts because wrong name, because you can't hold James to something if it looks like Bob was the contracting party. Next one. In your contracts, do not agree to agree. A contract is an agreement. An agreement to agree is not a contract. It's just cute and fluffy. No court will enforce an agreement to agree. They can't. I force you to get along. When have you, kids, right? Have you ever managed to force your kids to get along with their siblings? I force you to be nice to each other. Right? No, right? Courts cannot force people to be nice to each other. So even if you put in words like, we agree to negotiate in good faith, right? All of these good faith, reasonable, none of that makes a difference. An agreement to agree has absolutely no legal effect. It is essentially a non-binding LOI, and it is nothing more than a kind of wet handshake between people. And it's a waste of money. It's a waste of legal fees. It's a waste of legal fees to have a lawyer review a contract where the core terms you have said, well, here's the license that we're getting, and we'll agree to royalty amounts when we get there. No, because when you get there, the person who is the licensor is going to say, Royalties, well, we said we'd agree to agree. I want $1 million. Well, no, it's probably going to be $1 billion at that point, right? And you, as a licensee, are going to be like, no, I shall give you $1, one only, right? Like, once you're there, once it's certain, then like, what are we arguing about, right? People are going to take very polarizing positions. Fully executed. A contract that does not have the signatures of all the parties is not legally binding on any party that has not signed it. Don't tell me that you definitely have it somewhere, because a court will not accept, I definitely have it somewhere. I think I got a DocuSign, but I definitely do have it somewhere. The court will be like, well, unless you can produce it, we'll just assume that you don't have it, right? And don't expect the other side, when they are trying to get out of a contract, to go digging around for it too hard, right? Plus, an investor will look at a contract and go, well, it's really nice that the company signed it, but you're telling me that this is your biggest customer. I don't see that they've agreed to do anything, because that line, right? Big customer, underneath big customer, it has a line, right? If there's no wiggly something on that, right? Can be DocuSign, I don't mind, right? Can be like a paw print, like not a paw print. Can be an X, I don't care. Anything that indicates that they signed it, that's gonna bind them. Otherwise, if there's just a line with nothing on it, that's a useless piece of paper, PDF, useless megabyte of storage. Lastly, save it where you can find it. Nowadays, just think about it. How many laptops do you have in your house from like 19, like from like 19 whatever, maybe not 19, right? 2020, the laptop that you were using in 2020, right? We don't throw them away, because we know that there's stuff on there that we need, right? They just sit in our garage gathering dust. The problem is that we throw away the chargers. You'll never get that charger again, right? So save it where you can find it. Save it securely, right? Do not like save it on your Facebook, right? I can just about tolerate saving it in a Google Drive. I would much prefer you saved it up to some kind of like secure platform. Dropbox is good, but it's not so great for when you want to share things with your investors. So I would suggest finding a really good data room, and you can just populate it as you go, so that when an investor comes to you at 7 p.m. on a Friday night and says, you know what, Emily, I've decided I am going to invest in your company. I've got 20 million for you. I'm going to take the whole round. Your worries are over. I'm going to take you all the way through. The only thing I need is access to your data room. Emily, you can go, no problem. Click, click, done. Right? If you do it as you go, then you will not have to waste so much time digging for documents in laptops that you have stored in your garage. Those hard drives are probably corrupt anyway. So again, just really good hygiene. I call it the stupid stuff, and I would encourage you to get started.